Good morning. My name is Lauren Lele, and I am the Director of Community Benefits and the Community Collaborative at Newton-Wellesley Hospital. Thank you for joining us and welcome to our program titled Nutrition and Aging, Eating for a Healthy Mind and Body. Today's program is part of our ongoing senior webinar series and is being hosted by the Newton-Wellesley Hospital Nutrition Department and the Elder Care Council. Elder Care is one of the 8 councils within the collaborative that hold educational sessions open to the whole community. Before the program officially starts, I would like to mention a few of the logistics for the next hour. We will be leaving plenty of time for questions and answers and would ask that you use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen to type your questions in. I will monitor these questions and be asking them of our presenter at the end of the speaking portion of the program. And now let me tell you a bit about Nicole Myers, who's our presenter today. Nicole has been working in the field of nutrition since 2007 and currently works in the outpatient clinic at Newton-Wellesley Hospital. She is a registered dietitian and certified diabetes educator. She counsels people in all stages of life on ways to improve health, given a variety of medical conditions, including cardiovascular disease, diabetes, digestive health, pregnancy, and disordered eating. And now to begin our program, I will turn it over to Nicole.
Good morning. Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate the welcome and the interest of everyone in showing up today. We've got a lot of participants, which is really exciting. And I think topics around nutrition are just fun anyway. So hopefully you'll all get something, a little bit of something out of today's presentation. And again, it's titled Nutrition and Aging, Eating for a Healthy Mind and Body. For a quick outline for today, we're going to talk about foods that support brain health and the aging process. And I'm going to emphasize foods to add to your diet, as I feel it's a more positive way to talk about nutrition and diet changes. We're going to try to put all of those foods together. So we'll go through each food separately. And then we'll talk about putting it all together, like what that can look like in a day with a sample meal plan, some meal planning tips and suggestions as well, and then lifestyle factors that are going to support aging. Including movement, rest and sleep, stress, and tough emotions. So to start, the Mind Diet is what we're going to focus on today. That's a more it's a research-based, healthy, and balanced way of eating with a focus on specific foods that are going to support brain health and aging. The Mind Diet stands for Mediterranean-Intervention for Neurodegenerative Delay. And it takes a little bit of the Mediterranean diet, which we're probably more aware of, as well as the DASH diet for cardiovascular health, and puts them together in a way that has shown to be protective for against dementia and cognitive decline. So again, in the research that's been done, the Mind Diet, there's definitely the potential to reduce the risk of developing dementia and other forms of cognitive decline when trying to adhere towards a Mind Diet style, which we'll talk about next. It's also associated with a slower rate of cognitive decline. And this eating pattern is also very supportive for things like cardiovascular health and diabetes. So think of that as a bonus. So what is the Mind Diet? Really, it's quite flexible overall. It really can be, there's no set guidelines on how to follow the diet. So it really can be interpreted in a way that fits your lifestyle, which I really enjoy. It can be flexible. It's going to encourage eating more of a specific 10 specific foods, which we'll go through next, and eating less of 5 specific foods. The diet overall is largely plant-based, but it's not strictly vegetarian, which is another bonus in my opinion. plant-based eating is, very trendy. It's a hot topic right now. So there's a lot of options in stores, or more options for plant-based eating. More popular. You may find it in the media and magazines, more cookbooks out around plant-based eating, which is going to be helpful. There's no specific calorie goal, but it's encouraged in the research, to maintain a quote healthy weight. And that really is, a number that can be decided between you and your provider. So no specific calorie goal, which is great. All right, so the MIND diet. So some facts about the MIND diet. It was developed, and the study was led by Rush University Medical Center in Chicago, I think in the late 90s, I believe, early 2000s. They followed about 923 adults for roughly like 4.5 years, I believe, that did not have any cognitive decline. And these folks generally were in retirement communities, which is how they found them. The average age was about 80, with a range of 58 to 98 years old. And they found that they followed these folks. They did yearly in-home exams. They came to them, which was really nice, a yearly exam. And they also did a food frequency questionnaire of 144 foods. So they asked them, in the last year, how often do you eat, green leafy veggies, for example, and had them go through 144 foods to kind of observe what they were doing at home naturally. Based on this, they were given a MIND diet score. And through that, they came to the conclusion that, strict adherence to the diet. So again, eating more of these foods, less of certain foods, decrease the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease by 53%. And even moderate adherence lowered the risk by 35%, which I think is kind of the biggest takeaway here. Even making a few changes can give some benefit to cognition potentially, but any of these changes is also going to be super helpful for managing things like blood sugar, cardiovascular health, all sorts of things. So kind of a win-win, really. The limitations around the study related to the MIND diet would be the self-reporting of what they ate. It's pretty difficult to do good quality nutrition research, honestly. And a food frequency questionnaire, it gives us some information, but it like if I were to ask you what you ate last week, it's kind of hard to think back accurately. So there's a little bit of bias there in self-reporting what we ate, but oftentimes that's kind of what we have available to us. So as far as the foods to eat more of, if you want to take a little screenshot of this or take a picture with your phone, these are going to be the top 10 foods for brain health. And really, they're all going to support health in general. If someone was coming in asking me about cardiovascular disease or, even diabetes, really most any condition that I can think of, these are going to be the foods that we're going to try to gain more of for multiple reasons related to the nutrients in the foods, the fiber, the rich sources of protein. So these are going to be the ones we're going to talk about next. Starting with green leafy veggies. So green leafy vegetables are going to include things like kale, Swiss chard, spinach, Brussels sprouts, broccoli. We're going to try to get 6 or more servings a week. So kind of trying to think of, once a day, a green leafy veggie is definitely a win. In these foods, there's a lot of folate, vitamin E, carotenoids, and flavonoids, which are beneficial plant chemicals that have great properties to support health. And all of these nutrients are also associated, they're associated with slowing cognitive decline. So super healthy foods to get in there. Ways to enjoy these foods, of course, salads is the obvious one, but incorporating some of these foods in bean and grain salads, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Roasting them, seasoned, so making them taste good, add spices and seasoning them in a way that's enjoyable to eat. Air fried is very popular right now. I feel like everybody's got an air fryer that are kind of making veggies and different foods nice and crispy. If you like a different texture, stir fry is great. Including these foods in soups and casserole dishes this time of year is fantastic as well. The second food we'll talk about is just all other vegetables. So I tried to write out most of what I could remember right here, but it's truly any other vegetable, just aiming to eat one vegetable in addition to the leafy greens per day. So that would be, your 2 servings there. And that would include something like bell peppers, onions, garlic, squash, green beans, eggplant, tomatoes, root vegetables such as potatoes or parsnips, carrots, beets, corn. Truly anything else is going to count and be fantastic to add. Even a white potato. I always hear, I shouldn't eat white potatoes, but it's fine. All of the colors, including white, is fine to eat. So, at least 2 servings of veggies a day, 1 to be green leafy, and another serving as a minimum would be fantastic. We've got berries next. So aiming to eat berries at least twice a week is ideal. That could be, strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, blackberries. Ways to enjoy could be, as part of a fruit salad, on top of yogurt or cereal, within a smoothie, which I feel more so is summer appropriate, especially on a day like today. But if you're rocking the smoothies now, that's fantastic. And frozen is a great option, which I want to bring up. Frozen, fruits and vegetables really are harvested at peak freshness, and then they're frozen and they lock in those nutrients. So they're just as healthy. You get just as many benefits as having that be, a fresh berry that was picked here. So don't shy away from, incorporating frozen fruit and vegetables if that is something you enjoy. Definitely cost-wise too, to get something like raspberries, strawberries, we're paying a lot this time of year because they're not in season. So it's a cost-effective way to go about it as well. Nuts. So nuts, nut butters, aiming to get about 5 servings of nuts per week. So a serving, what does that look like? It looks like about 1/4 cup, which is one, pretty large handful. That could also look like, if you prefer peanut butter or almond butter, cashew butter, there's many butters these days of any kind of nut, that would be about 2 tablespoons. Aiming for variety is always going to be fantastic, really with anything we're eating. But feel free, to eat any type of nut. They're all going to have some great benefits. So if almonds aren't your thing, just because they're particularly popular right now, you don't need to eat almonds. Walnuts, peanuts, cashews, Brazil nuts, pistachio, a nice mixed nut would be great. So about 5 servings a week. Next up, we have olive oil, which is probably not a surprise. We've all likely heard that olive oil has some great health benefits for heart health and just over the years. So using having your primary oil that you cook with being primarily olive oil can be very helpful. Other good options as well are avocado oil and canola oil. Avocado and canola oil can, when you're cooking, they're able to get to a higher temperature if you're sauteing or something without getting that smoking. So something like olive oil is a little bit more delicate. So if you were doing something like a stir fry or sauteing, you might try avocado as well. Next up, we have whole grains. We want to aim for at least 3 servings of whole grains per day. And so just to get a sense of what is a serving? A serving is a slice of bread, 1 serving of crackers, which will kind of be dependent on the type of cracker that you have. It could look like 1/2 cup of cooked oatmeal or another grain such as rice or barley or farro. And when we're reading for labels, the first one on our list here is whole wheat with that little asterisk. And I just wanted to kind of pause and note that when you're looking for whole wheat products, so whole wheat bread, you want to look at the ingredient list and have that first listed ingredient have the word whole in it. So if it says just wheat flour, it wouldn't technically be whole wheat. So you want that word whole in there when looking for any whole grain product, whether that be, wheat, oats, rye, what have you. You'll also notice when that word is in there, whole wheat flour, the product's also generally going to have more fiber as well, which gives us a benefit for blood sugar and digestion and all sorts of things. Oats are a wonderful whole grain and great this time of year. Oatmeal, baked oatmeal is very comforting, really great for cholesterol as well. Brown rice, wild rice, quinoa, barley, bulgur, even polenta, grits, corn. Popcorn is technically a whole grain, which is always a welcome fact when I'm working with people. Fish, we're going to try to aim for eating once per week. And you may notice in other diets, like such as the Mediterranean diet, I believe they encourage fish more than once a week. And really just with this research, they found that having more than one serving is fine. It's not going to be bad for health by any means. There just was there weren't any additional benefits to eating fish, say 3 times a week, specifically for cognition. So if you're eating, if you've been told by your doctor, your dietitian or whatnot to eat fish, 2 to 3 times a week for your heart health, say, I wouldn't decrease that because of this. You're just not going to get any additional benefit. Some good sources of fish are going to be salmon, sardines, mackerel, lake trout, tuna. These are the fattier types of fish that have more of those omega-3 fatty acids, which we associate with, decreasing inflammation and potentially, helping with heart health and other benefits such as that. And cod and haddock would also be good options. Truly, any fish here, but I didn't want to list them all. These are just some of the more commonly eaten. Then we've got beans and legumes. We want to aim to incorporate beans at least 4 meals per week, which I think out of all of the things might be the biggest change for most people in hearing this, just talking to people all day about food. Beans aren't as eaten as frequently as maybe they could be. And that's going to include anything like, black beans, white beans, kidney beans, pinto, garbanzo, or chickpeas. That could be lentils. It could be soybeans, such as edamame, tempeh, tofu. These are fantastic foods which have so many great nutrients in them. They're fiber rich. They're going to be great for blood sugar. If you are doing a plant-based diet, if you're vegetarian or vegan or wanting to lean more that way, beans and legumes are going to be your main staple is in order just to get enough protein and enough nutrients. They're great in soups and stews. Bean and grain salads are one of my favorite things. And that's something you can Google very easily, bean and grain salad. It's going to show you how to incorporate some of these beans with some good flavor, and as well as some other whole grains that maybe you haven't used before, such as farro or barley, in a salad that you would eat cold. It'd be something you could make on the weekend and eat, as a side with your lunch or meal throughout the week. They keep for a few days, which is really nice, but it's a way to incorporate beans, grains, some kind of vinaigrette or dressing, and some great veggies as well. So there can be some wonderful flavors you can put together. I highly encourage you to look into it if you've never heard of bean and grain salads. And then hummus, of course, is an easy way to get in some of these beans and legumes. You can put that in a wrap or have it dipped with, veggies and whole grain crackers. There's a lot you can do with hummus as well. Poultry, we're going to aim for chicken or turkey at least twice per week. So out of all of the animal-based proteins, the fish and the poultry is what the MIND diet is encouraging. So you can have that, a few nights a week, which can, complement what we're doing with the veggies. And then last but not least, we have some wine. As the 10th food, the red wine, excuse me, contains the antioxidant resveratrol. And this is also found in grapes, berries, chocolate, and peanuts. We want to limit it to no more than 1 glass of wine per day. And you might want to, if you're not drinking now, we're not saying to go ahead and start drinking. Again, you can get this through berries, peanuts, and if you want to talk more with your doctor about if that's even appropriate for you to add a glass of wine per day, there are some medication interactions. As just a side note to kind of think about this one for a minute, but it can't hurt with cognition if you're okay with alcohol, with wine specifically. And then our foods to eat less of. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here because these foods are well known, right? So if you've had any challenges with heart health, we've heard to eat less red meat, butter, margarine. Cheeses in moderation is a pretty typical recommendation you'll see across many diets. Pastries and sweets, fried and fast food. So I feel like nothing here is too surprising or too out of left field. But so these are foods to eat less often, more in moderation, just kind of be more mindful around. But not to say that, by eating them, it's negatively affecting your cognition or anything like that. So just less of is going to be helpful. I'm putting it all together. This is a meal plan that was in a group of slides that I'm updating for this presentation. So I'm not really sure where the meal plan totally came from, but I do like some of the ideas on here for foods. I will say it's not perfect. Again, there's some good meal ideas. Generally, following a meal plan such as this to a T isn't super realistic for people. There's a lot of people, including myself, which I would need some snacks in here as well. I don't do just the 3 meals a day. It doesn't work for my body. And I also don't have the time on Thursday to have some grilled salmon with sauteed kale. Maybe if it was a leftover, but so I think these are some great ideas. I do think sticking to meal plans or expecting that you follow a meal plan to a T can feel a little bit defeating because it can be difficult to do. So I think we can take some inspiration from some of this stuff that you might find on another website, or looking at this, or within maybe a cookbook that you pick up. So there's some great inspiration, but don't feel like it has to be all or nothing, like I'm following something or I'm not. So meal planning strategies, just to kind of bring up as we're talking about food, because it's one thing to know, okay, these are the foods I should maybe try to get more of, but it's kind of another thing to try to put that into practice. So some things that I notice in working with others that can be helpful, purchasing groceries 1 week at a time is going to generally be helpful for folks. If we're going less often, it can be a little bit harder to get that produce in, or even just to think about, in 2 weeks, what am I going to want to eat that week? Can be more challenging. And when doing meal planning, again, don't think that it has to be, I'm planning out 7 meals, at least, 7 meals a week or whatnot. Try even just 3 to 4 dinner meals each week. That can get you a good part of the way. Maybe there'll be some leftovers, but that can be a good starting place if you're not meal planning at all whatsoever. When you're thinking about your meals, trying to aim for, a protein, a carbohydrate of some sort, vegetable, a fat source. And I know I'm not going into this just out of sake of time today, but try to aim for balanced meals if you can. So get a vegetable in there, get some kind of a grain or potato or squash, and some kind of a protein, whether that be chicken or fish or tofu. If you can make extra for lunch leftovers, that can be really helpful for the next day. Kind of thinking of meals you can cook once, eat 2 or 3 times, saves you some time in the kitchen. Thinking of using your frozen foods later in the week, such as your vegetables and fruits, just as foods don't last as long right now as far as produce goes because they're not necessarily in season here. So saving some of those frozen foods for later in the week. can be helpful. Finding a few staple meal ideas that are going to work well for you is a great idea. And just keeping those ingredients on hand. So for my family, one of our staple meal ideas we do most every week would be like bean and veggie quesadillas. So it's something that I always know I have beans in my pantry. We use whatever veggies are on hand generally. I might have an avocado laying around because that's a staple food that's always on my grocery list. Same with the tortillas, those keep quite well. So that's just one, really quick Thursday night, end of my work week kind of thing that gets on the table. So think of some quick staple meal ideas that aren't gonna, require a recipe and all sorts of different ingredients. If you're new to plant-based eating, and again, you're wanting to lean that way, aim for just one new recipe a week. It can be really overwhelming especially if you're not one that is in the kitchen a lot, to try to take on a lot of new ideas and recipes. So it could just be, one simple recipe each week that you're trying to incorporate. And maybe you start with beans because you don't work with beans a lot. But I wouldn't do more than one a week because it can be overwhelming, and wouldn't want that to be a setback. Sharing new meal ideas with others. So that could just be really, I just wanted to put this bullet here to encourage people to share food with others. So say you have a friend who is also interested, maybe you cook one kind of newer meal each week and bring some to your friend, or share that meal together. That can just be a nice way to also be more social with meals, which is great for just well-being in general. Think about borrowing cookbooks from the library. The library has so many cookbooks. I think the last time I went, I found like 2 enormous rows of them. It's pretty amazing how much exists out there. But it's a great way to kind of peruse different cookbooks that might work for you, that you might want to purchase, or even just picking out a few new recipes. You can also spend some time online finding recipes that are of interest to you. There are so many cooking blogs out there now that have endless recipes. I also really like eatingwell.com. They do a lot of good recipes as well, and we'll filter them between 15-minute meals or more elaborate meals. So you can kind of decide what you want to put into it. When you're looking for cookbooks or online for recipes, some of the search terms you could use would be the MIND diet, Mediterranean, DASH diet, plant-based would be ones that would kind of get you to some of these recipes that would include more of these MIND diet foods. Old Ways is another great website that's particularly fantastic for the Mediterranean diet. So you could check out Old Ways again, or Eating Well, Cooking Light. And then again, there's so many cooking blogs that offer really fantastic ideas. Last but not least, I wanted to just add, a note about lifestyle and aging, and the factors that really can kind of help or hurt our ability to take care of ourselves as we age, to make meals for ourselves, or really just even to focus on what we're putting in our body. That's really tough when we're not getting rest or sleep, or when there's significant stress, or when other things are going on. So it's great to talk about foods and things, but just I like to, with most of my patients, kind of talk about these 3 things here, because really I do see it as the foundation of health. And when all of this is in a decent place, then we have the ability to really do more with food and put more of our bandwidth into shopping and figuring out what we're eating and taking more care there. That's really difficult to do when we don't have these 3 pieces, again, in decent shape. So the first would be rest and sleep. Aiming for 7 to 9 hours of sleep each day is helpful, and that is a range there. That's not to say if you're getting 6 hours that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just kind of trying to reflect on how rested do we feel when we get up. Prioritizing rest when you need it. It's taking a nap when you need it, or making more space in your day for more restful activities is a great thing. And also considering your bedtime routine. And again, I'm not a sleep specialist or anything like that. I just talk with a lot of people about their lifestyle, and thinking about considering, do I give myself time to kind of unwind at night, or do I turn off the TV and then expect to just fall right asleep? Thinking about activities that are going to kind of unwind you before bed, unplug you from screens and things, just to set up your chances for a restful night, to have that be in a good place. Number 2 would be stressors and mental health. Creating outlets for stress and tough emotions in our daily life is going to be really important, because we can't really escape it. This is a really difficult time that we're all going through. So I think acknowledging that and seeing how that can play a role in how we take care of ourselves. So including your time in your day for something that brings you joy. Simply, it could be a new hobby, it could be many things, but something that's just purely for pleasure is something that I would encourage. And also get connected, ask for help. This is really tough. There is help out there. I think it's just recognizing, it's okay to ask. It's good to ask. That, it's one way to support yourself. And then enjoyable movement. Aiming for 150 minutes of movement each week is something we would encourage most people to aim for, and that can be in 10-minute increments. It doesn't have to be an hour at the gym, sweating or anything crazy. It really is any movement for 150 minutes a week would be fantastic, not only for overall health and cognition and all of these things, but just for wellness. And again, kind of goes back to the mental health as well, getting some of those endorphins and so those good feel-good hormones. And when doing so, really trying to find enjoyable movement in order to adopt this practice into your daily life. So by that, I mean doing something you enjoy, and trying different activities. That might be something with other people. It might be meeting up for pickleball or walks outside. It doesn't have to be, kind of getting on a treadmill and, putting your head down and getting it done. The more enjoyable it is, we're really going to get more physically and emotionally out of the movement, because it's going to stick. It'll become more of a lifestyle than anything. So big takeaways are, the results on the MIND diet are promising, even with that moderate adherence, but further research is needed. I'm sure there will be more in this area, especially with more of the plant-based diets becoming more in the mainstream. And then another great takeaway is there's no risk in adopting these food principles, as they're compliant with general healthy diet recommendations to reduce things, again, like cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, with the exception of adding the wine daily. So again, talk to your provider if this would be compatible with your health goals, but otherwise, eating more of these foods or less of the other foods is not, is going to fit basically everybody's needs. And then last but not least, the MIND diet is easy to follow. Even moderate adherence has shown to have some really good benefits. So adding a few servings of veggies each week, or trying to incorporate beans or nuts more often will provide health benefits, and generally just helps us feel our best, digestion-wise, all sorts of in all sorts of ways. And then last but not least, food doesn't have to be all or nothing. And I think I want that to be like the biggest takeaway. So if there are some foods on this list where you're like, oh, I do like Brussels sprouts, we could have them more often, I just don't think of it, then fantastic, like take that with you. But it doesn't have to be all or nothing. We don't have to just eat this group of foods and avoid the others at all costs. It really is these small changes over time can make a big difference, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And then just want to put a little plug in here for the outpatient nutrition and diabetes clinic, or really any nutrition provider, wherever that might be, if you're looking for more personalized guidance. If you're hearing me talk today and you're like, I wonder how this would work with my condition or whatnot. Oftentimes there's a lot of personalized questions around nutrition and health that really is best met with a one-on-one appointment. just to make sure we're taking into account all of the things that are going on within your life. So if you need any help, you know, doctor's order, referral prior to calling anyone for an appointment. But here at Newton-Wellesley, our phone number is listed right here. If you feel like you need any help, or if I can be of any assistance, or any of us, we have 4 dietitians here that are all fantastic. Just let us know. Thank you.
Nicole, that was amazing. And we have many, 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 many questions that have come in through the chat, as well as the Q&A feature, which is fantastic. And thank you all who are listening for submitting those. I'm writing feverishly so I can try to group them together as best I can, and I will do my darndest to get to all of them. One thing I just want to mention, because this has definitely been asked through the questions, we are going to post this recording on the Newton-Wellesley Hospital YouTube channel. You will be receiving an email from the Newton-Wellesley Collaborative either by the end of today or definitely by the end of the week, with the link to that and how to access that, as well as some of the resources that Nicole has shared for us in terms of some of those websites, which will be great, and some resource materials. So we will be following up with this great content. So I just wanted people to be aware of that, because they were definitely asking. So as I said, I'm trying to group these questions as best I can, but a few questions have come in around the fish category. So in terms of, I'll give you kind of 3 of them. Is canned tuna in water good? Can you comment on farm-raised salmon? And what about shrimp? So I don't know if you can kind of speak to those 3 things.
Yeah.
And actually, Nicole, before we go into that, is there a way that you can stop sharing your screen so then it will just be our faces back to the?
Yes.
Perfect. That's great.
Thank you. Thanks. So yes, canned tuna is absolutely fine. And if you eat it more often, I would encourage you to try more of like the chunk light or shipjack, because it's a little bit lower in mercury. That's the one thing you want to think about. But yeah, canned tuna in water would be fantastic. That's fine.
Okay.
And then to speak to the farm raised salmon, so I'm not like as up to date with this, the whole seafood around like sustainability and all of that. There's a lot of information there that I can't say that I'm tip top shape with. I do often refer people to seafoodwatch.org for information. They have some good information around mercury in fish, as well as I believe sustainability, if that's what we're kind of going for with these 2, with the shrimp and the salmon. I think farm raised salmon is fine. You know, if it's either not having any or having farm raised salmon, then I think that's, you know, that's going to be realistic for a lot of people. It's less costly, right? And that's what you're going to get most of the time when you're dining out. So it's used a lot. I don't think there's any disadvantages or, you know, worries about having that. Shrimp is fine. Shrimp would be, you know, more under seafood, I think, than fish. I'm sure that some of this fish category within my diet is those higher omega-3 foods. Fish in general. So shrimp would be lower for sure on the omega-3s. I think it's you know, a good food to include in there, but I wouldn't say it would give you a lot of omega-3s per se.
Okay, great. Thank you. And so then in the category of eggs, we had some questions coming in terms of the pros and cons for eating eggs, number of times per week you should consume eggs, and is there kind of a type of egg or how it's cooked, you know, benefits or disadvantages, such as, you know, if it's scrambled, if it's boiled, if it's egg whites, that type of thing. So I don't know if you can just speak to that category.
Yeah. So I think this kind of falls in like 2 different categories: people that are watching their cholesterol and people who are maybe not so much. If you're not, then I would eat eggs freely. The yolk does have some good nutrition in it. It's really rich in choline and some other B vitamins. That's where the flavor is as well. So if you want to enjoy your eggs, I would include some yolk. As far as those who are watching cholesterol, I kind of usually take that on more of an individual basis. I wouldn't say, even if someone had high cholesterol, I wouldn't say you shouldn't have any eggs. We really are usually working more one-on-one with like figuring out how many a week. That would also depend on, if this person was more plant-based and that was like one of their protein sources, we might find ways to make it work for them because they need the protein. But I would still say, a few yolks or whole eggs a week would be fine for people with high cholesterol. I know the research has kind of gone back and forth, but I'll usually say a few is totally fine with the yolk. The egg whites don't have any cholesterol, I believe, or fat. They're kind of more the pure protein. So some people will add some egg whites to, one whole egg to get more volume out of what they're eating. So you could do that. That would give you more of the protein.
Okay, great.
And then as far as cooking them, if it's scrambled or boiled, that doesn't matter whatsoever. So however you enjoy it.
Okay, sounds great. Perfect. This was a good question. A couple of people asked in terms of the way to cook vegetables. So is there certain ways that where nutritional value is lost when you cook? So I guess the most obvious would be, boil or steamed or roasted. So is there a suggestion you have in order to retain the most nutritional value?
Yeah, I mean, again, that kind of really depends on the vegetable too. Like for example, tomatoes, if they're cooked, you have more access to a nutrient called lycopene, which is great for you. So in some cases, actually cooking brings out more nutrients. So I probably wouldn't worry so much about the cooking method. It's more so how you enjoy it, because then you'll eat more of them. So for me, I roast a lot of veggies, primarily roast them. I'll steam them if I have less time. If you boil them, yes, some of the like more water soluble nutrients will leach out a little bit, but I wouldn't say it's significant enough to say like, oh, then it's not worth eating this corn or peas or anything like that. It wouldn't be that significant. So I would just say, yeah, again, however gets more veggies in you. And for some people, they need softer vegetables, either for digestion or because of dentition or something. So again, if it's a really well-cooked veggie, you're still getting some great benefits.
Great. Okay, good suggestions. So obviously you talked a lot about beans and the importance of having that in your diet. And someone did comment, which is a good thing to talk about in terms of that often attributes to bloating. And so how would you suggest kind of ensuring beans are in your diet without kind of that uncomfortable aspects of what beans can attribute to your system?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I get this question a lot. So especially if beans are new for someone, or say they eat chili like once a month and they're like, that's their only bean. And they're like, oh, I get really bloated after. You probably will. Like one way to kind of almost like train your gut to digest beans more comfortably would be to kind of increase them slowly. So for some people that I'll work with digestive issues, we'll suggest even like a tablespoon of beans each day. And then maybe over the next 3 weeks, you do 2 tablespoons each day. Mm-hmm. So you can kind of train your gut to make more of this enzyme that we make naturally. It's an enzyme that breaks down some of these fibers and sugars. But it is common for beans to cause, some bloating and gas. That's why they have that famous song around beans. There's also, and if you don't want to wait for that process to happen, or if you're just like, I still eat beans and they bother me, there's always digestive enzymes that you could take with like your first bite of beans, and you would only take it with bean products. And that would look like Beano or Bean Assist. People will try. So you would just use as directed. It's over the counter. You can find it at CVS or Target or Amazon, I'm sure, wherever.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And so you did, and there were some questions around kind of wines and red and white wine, and where does that fit in? And obviously that was on your list. So that was good to know. But someone did ask, in terms of are there better red, so you said red wine, is there better red wines to select from in order to incorporate in your diet, or is there kind of just one big category?
I've always seen it in like research in general, and in any reading I've done is just like red wine. So as far as the specific type of grape or Merlot versus, another, I think it's just red wine in general has that resveratrol, which is the antioxidant, the plant compound that is associated with health benefits.
Okay, excellent. And then what about butter? So we had a couple questions in terms of what is a healthy substitute for butter, as well as someone asked specifically about pasture-fed butter. So I don't know if you can speak to that.
Yeah, so that's another, the eggs and the butter are always the question of the day. With good reason there. So for butter substitutes, I mean, there are so many out there. I guess I would just find something that doesn't have trans fats. So would have no partially hydrogenated oils. But there are, completely plant-based butters for those who are vegan. I'm trying to think of the brand off the top of my head that I'll usually suggest. It's in I can see it.
There's a Smart Balance. Smart Balance, someone had asked about.
I think it's Earth Balance.
Earth Balance. Okay.
But there are so many out there. That's really kind of hard to give like one blanket statement. When it comes to something like butter, I personally use it at home. I just use it less often. So again, that might be something that I use when I really want to taste the butter. I wouldn't use it in cooking, but I would use it as like something I'm finishing, say I have a potato or something like that. So I think it's just, trying to use it more mindfully as well. So whichever product you do choose, even if it is a margarine or a plant-based margarine, I think that was on one of the lists of, I think it was butter/margarine is the foods to have less of. I think it's just kind of finding ways to have less of those and other ways through some of those other foods or spices or condiments to get some good flavor as well.
Okay. So we did have some questions around kind of portions and serving sizes. So I know when you talked about the nuts, it was, I think, 1/4 of a cup. And then kind of with the nut butter was 2 tablespoons, et cetera. So one of the questions, so that kind of answered that, but one of the questions came in around leafy greens, specifically spinach. So like, what would you consider a portion for that in that category?
Yeah, so if it was like cooked down, as far as those leafy greens, I think it's 1/2 cup, just because when you cook them down, they do shrink so much.
Right.
If it was raw, I would say probably 1 cup would be a serving.
Okay.
Yeah, 1 cup, 2 cups. Really, I wouldn't feel like you need to limit it at all. So okay. I think I more so put the portions on things where people ask those questions more specifically than like vegetables. We kind of eat those freely. Yeah. Okay,
great. Good. And so then actually going back to the nuts, we did have a question that, if you do have a nut allergy, so obviously that taking that piece then out of your diet as necessary, do you have any suggestions for substitutes or kind of a different direction to take if that's, a concern?
Yeah, absolutely. That's very common. Yeah, I would say you can probably get, and again, this wasn't looked at specifically for the MIND diet that I'm aware of, but oftentimes when people have nut allergies, I'll suggest seeds instead. So whether that be the sun butter, like the sunflower seed butter, peanut butter, they put it, spreadable. Pumpkin seeds are pretty popular right now and are great for snacking. So you can put those on salads, or again, having a handful with a piece of fruit for a snack. But I would focus on seeds as like a nut substitution, just because they have a lot of the same nutrients. Another kind of snackable, similar to nut sort of feel is the roasted chickpeas or roasted edamame. They're crunchy, a little salty, and are, again, snackable. You can throw them on salads and things, and are going to give you some really good nutrition as well.
Great. No, good suggestions. So we had a couple of questions that came in about, you mentioned popcorn, obviously, in your presentation, but then folks had asked about packaged popcorn. So Smart Food or the Booma Chica popcorn, is there, does that change the category of the nutrition value?
Not necessarily. It's still a whole grain. It's a whole grain that has some cheese on it, maybe. So I wouldn't worry, so much about that. It's okay to have some different flavored popcorns, especially like the Boom Chicka Pop, and there's like a Skinny Pop that has different like flavorings and such. So really, it'll probably be adding sodium, salt, when you have something that's flavored. So if you're sensitive to salt or thinking about blood pressure, you might kind of factor that in. But I would say, occasionally that's going to be fine. And a nice air popper, and then adding your own toppings is nice too.
Great. Okay, and then we had some questions for the meat category. So obviously that wasn't mentioned. So kind of maybe just speak to that. And then at the same time, folks asked about kind of pork and veal. Like, is that healthy to eat for this diet, or what are your takes on kind of the incorporating that into someone's food intake?
Yeah. So related to the MIND diet specifically, I would say like pork and veal would probably fall under that like red meat category. And in general, that's going to depend on, your cut, right? So something like a pork loin is going to be leaner than bacon or ham, or it kind of depends. And I'm also not great with like certain cuts of meat or too up to date with that. But yeah, it's going to depend on the cut of meat, but those would probably fall in like the red meat category. So I would say if you're wanting to, try to adhere to like a MIND diet sort of lifestyle or way of eating, I would suggest maybe like once or twice a week, those foods, and trying to do more of the poultry and, the fish and the beans. The beans are the thing that kind of could be your, protein source for a meal. So I think that's kind of the takeaway of this and of plant-based eating is that, tofu or tempeh or beans would be your protein with some veggies and grain and fats and things like that. But that would be kind of the replacement.
Okay. All right, great. And then kind of in, looking at kind of alternatives and such, someone had asked, are gluten-free pastas made with beans a healthy alternative to eating actual beans? And then someone else had also just asked kind of where pasta falls into all of this as well.
Yeah. And there's some gluten-free pastas that will be made out of like corn or brown rice. And then there's some that are made out of like chickpea flour and black beans. You really can find pasta made out of like mostly anything these days. It's pretty amazing. So yeah, if you like it, then that could be a way to get in some beans technically. As far as pasta goes, that would fall under the whole grains. So again, that's not to say your regular pasta is not something you should be having or is bad for your cognition or anything. It's just saying, if we can choose more whole grains, that's great. Some people are going to be okay with whole grain pasta. Other people will not be so okay with that. And that's totally fine. You can pick and choose what you decide to incorporate for whole grains. So if that, for me, I really enjoy brown rice. I'll do more brown rice over white rice. And then I do enjoy regular pasta most of the time. And that's fine. That there's other ways to get in whole grains. So I wouldn't say that wasn't on the foods not to eat list. So I would say, yeah, okay, based on your preference.
Okay, excellent. And so I don't know if this is necessarily in your kind of space, but maybe you could speak to it. A couple of questions came in around vitamins. So, in terms of the balance of nature vitamins, as well as, if you're not able to adhere to the MIND diet 100%, would any supplements or vitamins be a way to kind of, have the whole thing, in a package of pieces that you're not able to address in your diet?
Yeah, that's a great question. When it comes to supplements, we want to be careful. So for example, vitamin E, people might try to supplement with vitamin E. It is a fat soluble vitamin, meaning you can get too much of it. And it can become toxic at certain levels. So you do want to be careful around supplementation. In general, I would say, like related to the MIND diet, I would say I wouldn't go and invest necessarily in a supplement like resveratrol. Like you can buy that in a supplement form. But to my knowledge, and again, I'm not on top of the research around this specific nutrient, but we find more of a benefit when these nutrients are included in whole foods, and there's some synergy in there that we don't even know, right? We still might not know 20 years from now, but somehow it works to support health better when it's taken in a whole food form. As far as supplements overall, I think multivitamins can be fine for people. I do encourage people to kind of work one-on-one with someone around that, just because there's a lot of nuance to it as far as their health history, medications they're on, their diet, so many things. So I would say that would be more of a one-on-one type question. But I think in general, one tip, when looking for a supplement, you want to find one that's been third-party tested. So somewhere on the bottle, ideally it would have like a stamp that's one is USP or NSF. Those are stamps that basically the company has sent out their product for third-party testing, because supplements aren't regulated by the FDA. So we want to be careful around what we're taking and different extracts and things. It can play a significant role in health and can be dangerous. So I would suggest one that's been third-party tested for purity and to say that what's in that supplement is in there, that is correct. So that's always a good sign. And one brand that does that, that's found pretty much everywhere, is Nature Made. So I can kind of say that one pretty broadly. And there are others for sure. There's like a whole list, but that could be a whole hour talk in its own. It's a good question.
We'll have to put that on our list for the next series.
Mm-hmm.
All right, excellent. That's great advice. Thank you for those recommendations and that guidance. We did have several questions around the dairy category. So your thoughts around dairy, such as milk, yogurt, and cottage cheese.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for the Mind Diet specifically, they do encourage like less of that. But it's interesting because in like the DASH diet, which is kind of, part of Earth, the Mind Diet takes bits and pieces of like the Mediterranean and the DASH diet. The DASH diet is more so for heart health, blood pressure, and that diet specifically is more dairy heavy, which is interesting. So I guess, and that diet has shown many health benefits as well. I think it's like one of the top 3. Every year they list like the top, diets. Mediterranean is always up there. DASH diet's always up there. And that one does have, I think, at least a couple servings of dairy a day. So I would say if that's part of your regimen and you're enjoying it, I wouldn't feel like you have to take it out necessarily. I think, again, in the few studies that have been done around the Mind Diet, they're showing it's not correlating with, better cognition, but I can't say that we can really say that causes worse cognition. Like none of this study, it's all, it's a casual relationship, right? So these foods are associated with better cognition, but none of it can we say, causes cognition to go to decline or to be better. It's very casual. So we have to be careful and not putting too much, emphasis in that.
Okay, excellent. So very regretfully, we are at 11 o'clock, and I know that there are so many more questions and great questions of things that people are curious about. I could definitely see us maybe repeating this type of seminar so that we can talk more about this subject matter, both in this population as well as others. So I apologize to everybody if we didn't get to your specific question. But I very much want to thank Nicole for spending this hour and sharing her insight, her expertise, and her advice with all of us. I know that I learned a great deal and have my own questions. I might follow up with her as an aside, but I hope that you all learned a great deal as well. So as I mentioned, we're going to be sharing resources with you after. You'll get an email from the collaborative with those resources, as well as we'll be posting the recording of the session on the Newton-Wellesley Hospital YouTube channel. And just as a reminder, Newton-Wellesley's Community Collaborative has a continuous menu of programs on many, many different topics. And these are listed on our website. Hopefully you also received an individual email with this new winter menu of programs that are being offered. But they do change. So we ask you to, look at the website frequently, spread the word to among your families and friends so we can have others join us as well. And on behalf of Newton-Wellesley, thank you so much for joining us and have a wonderful rest of the day. Take care.